We're going to talk about using the revisions checklist in order to make revisions to your personal narrative trash draft. So I've done the first two steps in my checklist I'm starting with revisions for structure. So I reread my narratives, so I checked it off, and then I determined what my message is. So I went to another page and I said, what do I want people to learn from my message, from my personal narrative? And I actually wasn't satisfied with my first two. I kept writing. It wasn't the first one I did. So I had to think through, like, what did I really learn and what do I want people to get from my writing? And so it took a little bit of time to kind of come down to that final conclusion that I drew. So now I'm going to go through all of the structure parts of narrative to make sure I am going to get that message across. The first thing I did was I reread and then I found where my conclusion paragraph is. And it looks like I have all this great writing, but when I start to look at the structure that I've made, I have a climax paragraph and I wrote some notes to myself. It says, expand and add detail, and this isn't really reading like a climax. Like, right at the very end of my narrative of 4 pages, I have one paragraph that isn't very exciting that probably should be the climax of my story. Then I wrote a note to myself. So I drew a box around it because that would be what the climax is of my story, where my mom is telling me that she had lied to me about my brother. And so then I went backwards and I put stars next to all my rising action paragraphs. And so I did see I do have a good deal of rising action, and that's where a lot of my story should live. So that's okay. But then when I went to my exposition, I saw that I put the green brackets around it. I saw that I have 2.5 pages of just setup for my story. Lots and lots of exposition, and so much of it isn't needed. So much of it. So I started going back and saying, what do I actually need for my readers to understand this message? And that'll come out in a little bit. But I know I do not need all of this backstory to set up this one climax paragraph. So then I found, again, I have no falling action. So that's a huge revision for me. So I wrote it in brackets, but I had to write a note to myself instead of actually making the brackets because it was missing. But then I was able to draw a box around my resolution, and it comes right after. So that's kind of a mess there. I found in my resolution there's like one sentence that does hint at my message. So I wrote a note to myself, expand and reflect on message and resolution. But then as I was rereading also, I saw that there were a couple sentences or ideas in my rising action that I might move to the resolution, or I might add some more detail to make sure my message ends up clearly. Then I saw that I like this. So then I drew an arrow here because I think I need to reorganize some paragraphs where I'm reflecting on my son not knowing my brother, but that's before the climax. So I think that reflection needs to go into either the falling action, and I need to put the arrow there, or it needs to go into my resolution. So I know I need to reorganize some stuff. My next thing, so I'm all done with the structure. So I have all those crossed out. Now the next thing I need to do is cross off anything that doesn't fit into it. So for example, I had to cross off this whole paragraph because it's nice and it's interesting about my family, but it's for sure off topic. As I was reading again, I found another paragraph where I was talking about me and my struggle, but my whole story and my climax is about my brother, and so I need to take that out. I know I have too much exposition, and so I'm going to narrow it down, take out stuff that doesn't need to be there, but also probably add some stuff in that's more specific to what my climax is about. So I know right about in this rising action, my first rising action paragraph, I needed to be probably more specific about what leads up right to this so that I can get to my conclusion or my climax with more like power. So I crossed out some stuff. I'm going to cross off anything that gets off topic, yes. And now my next job that I'm going to do is I'm going to write paragraphs. So I wrote notes to myself. So add detail here. I need to move that. I'm missing following action. I'm missing detail in my conclusion. So I'm going to open to a new page now. And you can't really read this because I made a mess of it, but it says adding climax paragraphs and details. So the first thing I'm going to do for my plan is I know I'm missing some stuff in my climax. So I'm just going to go back and just focus in on that one moment in time. It happens to be a phone call between my mom and me, and I'm going to write new paragraphs or new details. New paragraphs or details about the one moment in time climax paragraph. Hit climax. Period. So now my new job is to write more, to write differently, recognizing where I kind of fell short, taking out stuff that is off topic. I'm going to go add dialogue and things like that, but we're focusing on structure first. So I need to write I know I need to write falling action. I know I need to probably add detail to my exposition. I need falling action, paragraphs, probably multiple of them. So that's my last step, thinking about the structure of my personal narrative. I need to start writing different paragraphs and making sure I take out stuff that doesn't need to be there, if it's like extra, or if it gets off track from what I'm trying to prove. I also need to make sure after I write those extra paragraphs and kind of fill in where I'm missing, for example, falling action and resolution, like, do I need to break this rising action paragraph, for example? Do I actually have a story, or am I telling about a whole big old concept? Like, for example, all of my exposition is my whole life with my brother up to this point. While that's nice and lovely and maybe interesting, it doesn't need to be there as exposition for this climax and my message. I need to focus back, and my problem was I wrote a story about my entire life instead of a story about one moment in time. This is my one moment in time where my mom is calling me and I had a realization of my message, which for me is going to be do everything you can to protect and care for the people you love. So I learned my mom wasn't protecting me or my brother from this phone call. And so I don't necessarily need every single thing leading up to this. I need to cut out a bunch of exposition, and I need to like really highlight that this is my story, my one moment in time that I'm writing a story in, as if I froze time and I'm just blowing up this one moment, not every single thing that happened in my life with my brother. So that's how I need to make revisions, and that's how I'm using my revisions checklist for structure. Thank you. Bye.